Expanding plans. A top Vatican official is confident Pope Francis will visit 3 American cities. New Congress convenes. A Catholic lawmaker returning to Capitol Hill takes us behind the scenes. Hello, winter. Much of the nation is hit by the season's first Arctic blast. And Epiphany. There is much more to this significant feast than the story of the 3 kings. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, January 6th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. Nothing is official yet, but we have good reason to believe tonight that Pope Francis will visit not only 1, but 3 U.S. cities later this year. There's been a lot of speculation that when Pope Francis comes to the U.S. in the fall, he'll go beyond Philadelphia, and our Alan Holdren, our Rome correspondent, has it from a pretty high-level source that this is likely. Alan?
I had the chance today to speak with the Cardinal Secretary of State, Pietro Parolin. He's the top official under Pope Francis in the Vatican, and he's also going to be traveling with Pope Francis to the United States if everything goes next September. And when I ran into him, I had to film it on my iPhone, but I got this response from him about whether or not the Pope will also be going to New York and to the Washington, D.C.
I think so, but no official announcement has been done, but everybody's speaking of that, of course, the Philadelphia for the World Day of Family and also a visit to, but no official confirmation has been done.
Washington, D.C.?
Of course, but no official confirmation has been given.
Brian, I also had the opportunity to ask Cardinal Parolin about the normalization of relations between the U.S. and Cuba and the Vatican's part in that. And he said that Vatican diplomacy exists to build bridges. Word is here in Rome that the next goal in the sights of the Pope is to also approach China and to try and improve those relations with which the Vatican doesn't currently have full diplomatic relations. Brian?
Well, the Vatican clearly a key player on the world stage, and thanks for keeping us up to date. Alan Holdren in Rome. Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. It was a day of pomp, circumstance, and politics for the new Republican majority beneath the U.S. Capitol dome today. As mandated by the Constitution, the new Congress convened at noon.
Do you solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution?
In the Senate, with Vice President Joe Biden presiding, Kentucky's Mitch McConnell automatically ascended to Majority Leader. Despite an unsuccessful Tea Party-backed effort to unseat him, House Speaker John Boehner was calling for party unity. McConnell and Boehner are both positioning themselves for 2 years of clashes with President Obama, the first likely to come very soon as a veto showdown over the Keystone XL pipeline. Well, most House and Senate members say they are Christians, and nearly a third identify as Catholic. Chief White House correspondent Susanne LaFrankie spent some time today with a veteran Catholic lawmaker. Susanne?
Representative Mike Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania has served in the House for many years. Today, as he got back to work for a new session of Congress, he told me what role his faith plays in his work on Capitol Hill.
Come up here.
Just before being sworn into his 4th term in Congress, the Pennsylvania representative gave a tour to students from the Grey Nun Academy from Yardley, Pennsylvania. Mike Fitzpatrick says his Catholic faith inspires and guides him daily.
Our faith is part of who we are. It's part of how we were raised, our foundations, the earliest lessons in our lives.
Loving God, we give you thanks for giving us another day.
Aside from a Republican majority, the 114th Congress is also comprised of a large Christian majority. The percentage is higher than the general population. According to a new study by the Pew Research Center, more than 9 in 10 members of the House and Senate are Christian. 57% of those are Protestant, 31% Catholic.
I'm proud of my Catholic heritage and my faith, and I hope to be able to exhibit that in the way I carry myself as a congressman and in the votes that I cast as a representative of the 8th District of Pennsylvania.
The leaders of both parties in the House are Catholic. Republican Speaker John Boehner, who's pro-life, and Democratic Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, who is pro-abortion. Fitzpatrick, who is a staunch protector of the unborn, recently voted to ban federal health coverage for abortion. He's praying that Pope Francis will become the first pope to address a joint session of Congress while visiting the United States in September.
I would hope that he would take up the cause of the need to protect innocent unborn human life, take up the issue of freedom and democracy, where people are being repressed in many, many different areas of our world, poverty and hunger.
Before the new Congress was 2 hours old, however, a veto showdown with President Obama was set as the White House announced he would reject legislation approving the long-stalled Keystone XL pipeline, which Republicans intend to advance. Brian?
Thanks, Susanne LaFrankie at the White House, and we welcome back Susan Crabtree, the White House correspondent for the Washington Examiner. What do you see as the top priorities for this new Congress?
Well, of course, you have the Keystone Pipeline. Well, it's going to be a huge clash with Obama, as he's already said today and indicated with a veto threat. You have a major tax reform on the agenda. You also have a real test with Republicans internally on whether they really want to go after the executive action on immigration, the president's executive action, and whether they want to undo Obamacare. There's an internal debate within the GOP on how far to take that, and we'll see if they are committed to doing that or not.
Do you see any compromise at all, and where will we continue to see gridlock?
The compromise you will see, Obama and Mitch McConnell had a meeting before they went off for their break. You had compromise you saw on tax reform, trade, and infrastructure spending. And that's not shared on the other side of the Capitol with the House. So you're going to see some friction between the House and the Senate GOP on those very issues. But you can see some common ground between Mitch McConnell and President Obama on that.
You were on the Hill today for the vote on the House leadership. There was opposition to Boehner. It's small, Tea Party led. Is the GOP divided?
Well, actually, this is the biggest revolt that you've seen against this sitting speaker since 1923.
Really?
Yes, 24 House Republicans, the conservative wing of the party, really took issue with him and tried to lead a coup against him. I mean, I would consider this a big enough to be considered a coup. And yes, there's going to be a problem. Boehner is going to have to watch his right flank. He wants to exhibit this sort of a level-headed, we can govern sort of mantra going into this, but he's going to have to watch his right flank and not compromise too much with Obama.
You've got 2 years between now and when the next president is elected. Does this control of both the House and the Senate help or hurt the GOP in terms of their 2016 presidential hopes?
It's a very good question, because they're going to be walking a very fine line. Mitch McConnell this week said the first thing they need to do this week is to project an image that is not scary.
That's right.
And that was an unusual comment for him to make. But certainly it's they need to be standing up to Obama and showing their base voters that they can do so. But yet they also need to show that they can govern and accomplish something and compromise on key issues. So it's a fine line.
What do you think you'll see?
I think we'll see some compromise on tax reform, although it's going to be be interesting to see how far they push it when it comes to corporate welfare and closing loopholes for corporations, because Obama will really want to push that farther than the Republicans will want to. We'll also see an interesting debt ceiling fight coming up late spring, early summer, and we'll see a more gridlock on the Keystone Pipeline issue.
Interesting couple years ahead. Susan Crabtree with the Washington Examiner, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, President Obama hosting Mexican President Peña Nieto at the White House discussing trade, immigration, and Cuba policy today. The Mexican president praised Obama's executive action protecting 4 million immigrants from deportation. He said Mexico is ready to help its citizens living in the U.S. show documentation, such as birth certificates. He also favors the U.S. improving relations with Cuba. Mexico already trades with Cuba and has for some time. Both presidents say they hope the U.S. Congress will approve a new trade treaty. A manhunt is underway for a pair of suspects in the shooting of 2 more New York City police officers last night. Now, both officers are in stable condition tonight. The NYPD has released this surveillance video of one possible suspect. The attack comes after the fatal shootings of 2 officers late last month. Last night's shooting was in the Bronx as the officers responded to a call of a grocery store robbery. Germany's Cologne Cathedral goes dark for a purpose. The famous Catholic landmark turned off its lights this evening to counter a growing anti-Muslim movement. Thousands have rallied in recent weeks against the Islamization of Germany by Muslim immigrants. The symbolic step at the cathedral was taken just as a march was scheduled to start in the center of Cologne. Catholics in the Diocese of Gary, Indiana have a new shepherd tonight, Bishop Donald Hying. He comes from the Milwaukee Diocese and speaks fluent Spanish. His installation mass at Holy Angels Cathedral was seen here on EWTN this afternoon. Bishop Hying succeeds retiring Bishop Dale Melchick. The Catholic Archdiocese of St. Louis says attorney Marie Kenyon will lead a new Peace and Justice Commission there. The commission is charged with addressing the breakdown of the family, racial tension, and lack of education in some communities. A spokesperson says the commission is meant to deal with underlying social issues, not specifically with the racial tensions in Ferguson. Coming up, winter deals a bitter blow to the eastern two-thirds of the nation. And Rome's North American College dedicates a new building addition, reflecting more vocations to the priesthood. On Tuesday, January 6th, the traditional Feast of the Epiphany. I'm Brian Patrick. Thank you for joining us. Former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell has been sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. He and his wife were convicted of public corruption for accepting bribes of designer clothing and vacations to promote a dietary supplement. At his sentencing today, McDonnell said he's heartbroken and he's humbled. The Senate's top Democrat, Harry Reid, missed opening day of the new Congress. Reid is recovering from an accident that happened on his exercise machine at his Nevada home. Senator Reid tweeted his photo sporting a bandage meeting with his team as minority leader. He broke several ribs, some bones in his face, and suffered a concussion, so his doctors ordered him to work from home. Illinois Democrat Dick Durbin takes over his duties managing the Democrats on the Senate floor until Reid is able to return. Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush takes another step towards a 2016 run for president, forming a Political Action Committee, or PAC. It will lay the groundwork for a possible presidential campaign. The Florida Republican posted a video in English and in Spanish saying the PAC will help him support conservative candidates. The formation of this Bush PAC follows similar action by other potential GOP presidential candidates. A new Arctic blast dumps more than a foot of snow in some parts of the mid-Atlantic, leaving others in the deep freeze. Wyatt Goolsby reports from here in Washington tonight.
Yes, Brian, the first major storm of 2015 is here. It's brought snow and ice to much of the East Coast, and it comes as millions of travelers are coming home from the holidays and at least trying to get back to work. The federal government stayed open today, even though snow covered roads and walkways. Commuting was treacherous with multiple accidents reported. Snow delayed the start of school and reduced speeds on highways in western Pennsylvania. It also slowed commuter rail and air travel in the Philadelphia area as crews cleared the streets.
And something we have to deal with. You can't get away from it, you have to deal with it.
It comes after a weekend in which 24 states face winter storm watches, warnings, and advisories. And it's not just snow. Torrential rain caused landslides and flooding in parts of western Washington state yesterday. Floodwaters rose quickly as more than 5 inches of rain fell within 24 hours in some areas. Back on the East Coast, drivers in New Jersey face a mix of fog, ice, and snow.
Definitely dangerous out there. You got to be careful. I think it's hit pretty quickly, and people aren't realizing how much ice is actually on the ground. It's a lot more than you think.
It's looking like the cold weather will get worse before it gets better. Even parts of the south are expected to reach freezing temperatures by tomorrow morning. Forecasters say the worst of the temperatures will be tomorrow and Thursday. In Washington, Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Wyatt. In the Middle East, a powerful winter storm hits Syrian refugees in Lebanon especially hard. Thousands living in makeshift camps must endure a snowstorm on top of bitter cold. The UN says it will do its best to protect vulnerable refugees from winter's wrath. The Pontifical North American College in Rome dedicates a new facility today. This marks the completion of the first substantial building addition at the NAC since its initial dedication in the 1950s. The new space meets the needs of a larger seminary community and the college's program for priestly formation. Mark Randall is Executive Director of the NAC. And Mark, it's got to be a great day there with this beautiful expansion. Does this mean that we're seeing more vocations to the priesthood?
I think it does. We're certainly here full of capacity for the 4th year in a row. We're at capacity at the North American College in Rome. We have 256 men from 101 dioceses in the United States, Australia, and Canada. And frankly, things are a little tight here in terms of space. So about 6-7 years ago, we started to think about how we need to expand our facility to make sure that we can meet the spiritual needs as well as the physical needs of the men who are studying here in Rome.
Let's focus on the spiritual needs for a moment. There's a beautiful St. John Paul Chapel. Doesn't that give the seminarians access to the Blessed Sacrament and a quiet place to pray very close to where they live?
Absolutely, Brian. The St. John Paul II Chapel is a beautiful space. It's small, it's private. Our Chapel of the Immaculate Conception is an enormous chapel here in Rome. It's visited frequently. It can accommodate our entire community. But the St. John Paul II Chapel is a private space. It's directly off the residence floors. Obviously, the Blessed Sacrament is reserved there. It'll be a quiet space for the men to come really at all hours of the night. One of the seminarians told me today that he's very grateful that it's going to be so close to his room that he doesn't have to make the journey across really campus to go and spend time with our Lord. We have a 200,000 square foot facility here on 12 acres just a few yards from the Vatican. And so it's nice to have an opportunity and a space for them to be close to our Lord and deepen their spiritual journey.
And of course, NAC has been training American men for the priesthood since 1953. Just a brief history of the North American College for us, if you would.
Sure, Brian. Actually, since 1859, we began down just off Trevi Fountain, off the Via dell'Umiltà. That facility housed initially in 1859 only about 18 priests. Over the years, our 150-year plus history, we've grown. In 1959, we came up here to 12 acres on the Janiculum Hill as provided space by the U.S. bishops and the Vatican to expand our facility to grow and accommodate the need of the Americans who wanted to come and study and be formed in Rome. And really, it's been a tremendous journey. And as Cardinal Wuerl told me earlier today, this new tower, this new building addition is really an extension into the future. It's an extension of the willingness of U.S. bishops to send their men to study here in Rome. And it's a very visible sign of the many, many Americans who are willing and very, very generous with their financial support to make this mission a reality here in Rome. We're very, very blessed and very, very grateful.
All right, we're grateful to Mark Randall joining us, the Executive Director of the North American College, the NAC there in Rome, and assure the men there of our prayers. Mark, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Good night.
Up next, are people still being sold into slavery? We discuss efforts to end human trafficking. And today's Feast of the Epiphany goes beyond the three kings coming from afar. Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick, and January marks National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. Pope Francis, of course, has been very vocal on this topic, calling modern-day slavery, quote, a crime against humanity. Holly Burkhalter is Vice President of Government Relations and Advocacy at International Justice Mission. Help us better understand human trafficking. What does it look like?
In this day and age, you wouldn't think it would exist at all, but it does, and it has many forms. It can be the selling by pimps and brothel owners of kids to have sex with customers. It can be labor slavery, where people are worked like animals for 17 hours a day, 7 days a week. It can be little boys on fishing boats in Ghana where they've been bought and sold for $150 and then are just literally worked to death. But there's one quality that all of those forms of slavery have in common, and it is violence. It's violent coercion of people and the exploitation of their bodies and their labor for the profit of another.
How horrible. So during this Awareness Month, what is it that we should be aware of? What misconceptions are there? What should we know about this condition?
Well, the first thing to know is that it exists. It exists in America, it exists in many countries around the world, and it's big. There are tens of millions of slaves today. But the second thing to know, once you've begun to absorb that horrible truth, is that there's something that can be done about it. it is not a crime that will be with us forever, and it doesn't have to be, because slavery and trafficking can be stopped through effective law enforcement, apprehending the bad guys, throwing them in jail, and the people willing to exploit others start to dry up. The crime starts to wither away when you enforce laws against it.
So there is hope there, and Pope Francis dedicated his entire message on World Peace Day on New Year's to this topic. What role do you see our Holy Father playing?
Well, what's brilliant and beautiful about Pope Francis bringing this issue to the faith community and to the whole world is that, in fact, slaves, people in slavery, adults and children in slavery, are truly the least of these. If ever there was a definition of the least of these are beaten and thrown away people who are not valued in their own countries. They are frightened, they are voiceless, they are truly the least of these. They are exploited, they have no freedom, and by the Pope saying, notice these people, end this crime, it puts the issue squarely, I think, into every church, into every faith community, and that, I think, could be the beginning of a real revolution against modern-day slavery.
Very effectively, he's putting that message out there. There's a website at the bottom of the screen that you can contact if you want to be more involved in this and learn more about it. Holly Burkhalter, International Justice Mission. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, U.S. Catholics marked the Epiphany this past Sunday. Most of us did. But many around the globe celebrate that feast today on the traditional date of January 6th. Jason Calvi gives us a taste of some of the festivities.
Dancing in icy water in Bulgaria. And in Turkey, swimmers dive into the sea to find a crucifix thrown into the water by Greek Orthodox Patriarch Bartholomew I.
Perfect! Perfect! It's not caught, believe me!
Just a few highlights of Epiphany celebrations around the world. The word itself means manifestation, and historically Epiphany marks 3 of Christ's revelations to man: the kings visiting the newborn baby Jesus, the wedding feast of Cana, and Christ's baptism in the River Jordan. And so today, Orthodox Christians here in Greece take a plunge. Today in Rome, Pope Francis celebrated Mass.
I magi sono entrati nel mistero.
The Holy Father saying the Magi entered into the mystery. They passed from human calculations into the mystery. That is their conversion. And what is ours? And the Magi are the center of celebrations in Latin America and Spain. In Mexico City, 2,000 cooks helped bake a 19,000-pound cake, which was handed out in the city's main square. To many, it's a time for feasting, sharing gifts, and most importantly, conversion. A fresh start for the new year.
In Greek Orthodox and most Catholics around the world still celebrate Epiphany today. It was celebrated Sunday in Roman Catholic parishes here in the United States. The older Julian calendar used by Russian Orthodox and Christians in the Holy Land has Christmas tomorrow, with Epiphany coming later this month. Brian?
Happy Feast Day, Jason. It's good to have you back, and congratulations on the new addition to the Calvi family.
Jonah, Michael, thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Jason.
it.
Well, archaeologists are exploring what could be the site of the trial of Jesus before Pontius Pilate. Began excavating an abandoned prison building near this tower, Jerusalem's Tower of David. They think it may be the missing link in the puzzle of the Holy Land's history. Scholars and theologians can't say for sure that this is where the trial actually took place. It does, however, fit descriptions given in the Gospels of John and Mark. Pilgrims can see for themselves. The site is being opened to the public. Until tomorrow, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Thanks for watching as we leave you with some of the highlights of the Epiphany Mass at the Vatican. Good night and God bless you.